Hi, this is Alexia Tsotsis from TechCrunch, and I am here with Tony Uphoff, and he is the CEO of UVM TechWeb. And so you're responsible for all this.
Well, I can't take full responsibility, but 8 years ago, along with Tim O'Reilly and then John Patel, we were really trying to understand what was happening next with the web and really trying to get a sense of perspective about it. We were very interested in the fact that the web was not going to start versioning, if you will. We think really Web 2.0 was really about the idea that the web's the computational platform. The planet was wired. And so we were interested in establishing a conference where every year we'd bring basically the internet economy together to really talk about, okay, now what's going to happen next? Where are we going to go now that the planet is wired and the web is the computational platform? And I have to tell you, 8 years later, I'm kind of blown away. I mean, it's amazing, the 8 years has gone by so quick, but obviously in the development of the internet as a platform, it is moving in so many different directions, as evidenced by the conversations you've heard over the last 3 days. It's just been remarkable.
So we just finished Reid Hoffman's talk where he was talking about the idea of Web 3.0. He was saying Web 1.0 was just interactivity, being on a message board, and Web 2.0 was like user-generated content and social networks. And Web 3.0 is the implementation of a layer on top of all the data that those social networks have created. Yeah. Ever think about changing the name? I ask Patel this every year, and this year I haven't.
Yeah, well...
But now that Hoffman's doing his Web 3.0 shtick, don't you think that it's time?
You know, it's interesting. I think what's happened, right, at least for us, and maybe this is the benefit we have, is this particular event has become a brand. So the average person that attends this doesn't stop to think of Web 2.0 as a technical term. What they stop to think of is this has become the gathering place for the internet economy. And so I think we've been lucky in that regard in all candor. So technically speaking, is Reid reflecting there's a new level of infrastructure and fusion between applications and the technical layer that's going to come together that we could argue, it's like 4G is in telecommunications, we could argue that in the web, and he's right technically. But I also think he's hinting at something else, which is a phenomenal trend that relates to the data frame theme that we had here, which is everybody's now creating data and everybody's using data. So whether you're an end user, or whether you're a corporation, or a brand, or a marketer, data is becoming a really interesting element, and things like content has become data. You know, it used to be we talked data was only financial analysts and statistics.
Yeah.
Everything is leaving a digital signal that becomes part of data. So my answer to that is I don't think we're going to have a Web 3.0 as it relates to this brand. I think this brand's well positioned, but I don't know that the attendees think of it technically as Web 2, if that makes sense.
It kind of makes sense. What I was thinking about is the name of this iteration of the Web 2.0 conference is the data frame.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about why you chose that name? Because I think that was, simpatico with Reid's philosophy as well.
Very much so. Well, and you know, it reflects on the partnership. So between O'Reilly Media, John Patel, and TechWeb. TechWeb serves about 15 million technology decision makers in enterprise, global communications, and game development around the world. So if you look at our three companies, we have an amazing ability to study technology trends, buying demographics of enterprise IT audiences, and others, what products, applications, services they're buying. What we do when we brainstorm the theme is we come together with all that, pardon the expression, data, and then analyze what do we think we see happening. And the data frame came from those conversations where part of this is big data, meaning we're awash in data, and how do companies deal with data and what do we do with the data? Part of this is the bi-directional nature of data today. So in other words, as an end user, Facebook, LinkedIn, or whatever social network you might be using, you're not just creating data, you're actually able to analyze data and then adjust your experience by the data you put into the system, which is really interesting. It's like what happened with the read-write web, when we went from the read-only web to the read-write web. So we think there's some fascinating trends going on in the data layer and the data frame. The other aspect about it that people have touched on is, in some cases, we're seeing business models where the data itself is more valuable than the transaction, which is kind of fascinating. And so, long story short, we all got together, kind of geeked out on some of these trends we were seeing in our own businesses, and then helped bring together this idea of the data frame. And as you and I were talking before the camera rolled, I think we veered off point in many other conversations, but so be it.
What do you think was the most prominent or the most interesting off-topic theme? Because people really just took it
I was going to ask you if you got into this early on. Were you here from day one?
There was a Steve Jobs thread that just ran across every presentation for a while. I didn't see Ballmer, which is a very deep regret of mine.
You know what? Ballmer was great, and he got into.
I'm sure he was. He's Ballmer.
He got into the theme, but he also got into some really interesting areas talking about cloud. I thought his riff on where cloud is, he was interpreting cloud as we're now seeing the leading edge of cloud, which is apps, but platforms will follow into the cloud. And he did a pretty accessible but sophisticated analysis of what he meant by that. I thought it was cool. But the off-topic one I was thinking about that was on the first day, and I can't remember if it was Sean Parker or Mark Benioff that first introduced it, but the term was used that Facebook is actually the best personal operating system out there, quote unquote. And there was a series of people that picked up on that theme, not about Facebook, but the idea that from Twitter to Facebook to Google+, these are becoming personal operating systems, the implication being that there are other operating systems for business or other components of life and society. And I thought that was fascinating. It kind of hung there, and it didn't get completely unpacked by every speaker, but I thought it was an absolutely fascinating digression, if you will, off the theme of the data frame. I think the jobs stuff is really interesting too. We thought long and hard about what we do. And I don't care where you come from in the industry or in the world these days, this guy's legacy is extraordinary, and that shadow hangs over all of us in that event. And we thought about, do we do something, do we not do something? And we made the decision to just let it happen authentically. Let people talk about it, let it be discussed openly. And I agree with you, I felt a bit like he was in the room at various times, as people would talk on stage, but I never thought that it got overly, overly
pathetic,
fixated.
Melodramatic.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have any ideas for what you guys are putting together for next year?
Well, when I was giving John a hug at the end there, he's going to go collapse for a little while, but I said, hey, when do we get together to start talking about what we're going to do next year? It'll happen soon, but again, we have such an incredible advantage. Going back to data, we have so much data. In our case, with enterprise buyers and major tech buyers. In John's case, on the consumer web. On O'Reilly, from identifying kind of the faint signal of some of these early kind of things that are going on in tech trends. And the trio there is a really interesting, kind of ability to look at what are the big trends. For instance, Michael Dell spoke this year, and it's the first time Michael's been at Web 2.0. Well, classic enterprise guy. Michael's not, normally viewed as a Web 2.0 guy, although he's selling probably 2,500 servers a month to Facebook, right? So he's intimately a part of this. But it was, the idea of having Michael here really came from us talking about some of the enterprise trends we're seeing and how they're relating to some of the trends in Web 2.0. I think next year, you'll probably see something, not to give too much away, but I think this idea of social, local, mobile, and what's going to happen based on the intersection between social, local, and mobile might be an interesting series of themes, let's suggest.
People make fun of the social, local, mobile thing.
I know they do. Slow-mo, right? I know.
Social, mobile, locomotive is one that I heard.
I know.
Come on, baby, do the social, mobile, locomotive.
I like it. We can get that song going again. Yeah, it'd be great.
But it's a cliche because it's true.
You know what?
It's true. That's what's hot
really
right now.
And
it's
I don't
sad.
know. Are you geeking out on the 4S yet? Have you used one and done a demo?
I'm geeking out on the reports on the 4. I've been too busy covering this. I'm not the kind of person that does it first in line.
So
but I'm going to buy one.
We get demoed on everything, right? So in the demo, I will tell you some of the
hot,
things.
Right?
It is hot. But I think one of the big things that blew me away was the idea of having your data, as in my contacts and locations and things like that, matched to GPS, which is location, where now suddenly, if I said, hey, I want to make sure that I talk to the reporter at TechCrunch when I get to Web 2, and I walk in and it sees that I'm at Web 2 and it reminds me to get in touch with you.
I love reminders.
That's really cool.
That's iOS 5, though.
Right?
That's iOS 5.
No.
I love reminders.
Yeah, but what's happening is it's integrating with the location stuff. So now it gets kind of interesting. So I agree with you. The terminology is a little hackneyed or cliched, but I think the phenomenon is really going to accelerate, really take off.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks.